Welcome. You are now linked to your Telecom retirement.
Hey, how are we doing today? It is deep enough into January that I'm going to make a bet that your resolutions are dead. And it's probably like the second or third week. And I think it's like 3.5 weeks. It's like 24 days or something like that. I read a statistic that your New Year's resolutions are absolutely gone, demolished, you just gave up. And so if you have already, don't feel bad because you're just like everybody else. And I want to try to fix that today. It's funny when we think about resolution. When I think about resolutions, I'm always thinking about health, weight loss, and what I can do. I was always a quantity eater. I remember when I was a kid, there was this chain of restaurants, Friendly's, in the New England area. They were other places. I have a buddy of mine that said it was the poorest name for a restaurant in the history of the world because they weren't very friendly. I always thought they were friendly. The service was slow. They served very bland American food, but their French fries were like super crispy. So I always loved that. Their burgers were decent. Their breakfast, it's breakfast. Like you screw up breakfast. And they had ice cream. And they would have this bowl of ice cream that it was like the goblet of King Arthur. It had to be, I don't know, 6 inches wide. And it was a goblet and it was up probably a sort of 6 inches. So figure a 6-inch cylinder of ice cream and hot fudge. I was always a hot fudge fan. I was chocolate, hot fudge, walnuts, whipped cream, peanut butter sauce if they had it. I could eat 2 of those. And that's how I gained all the weight I did. Was things like that. I was always into that. But I spent the last 10 years. Yeah, I'll say the last 10 years actually bringing my health goals into line. And gosh, maybe it's longer than that. Maybe it started longer ago than that. Is the biggest thing I did was I used to drink. I can't believe I'm admitting to this one. I used to drink a 2-liter bottle of diet soda. It was diet soda just about every day. I think my wife bought 5 2-liter bottles of soda every week. Obviously, I didn't have it for breakfast. I was at work all day for lunch. So from the moment I walked into the house for dinner until I went to bed, I would drink most of a 2-liter bottle of diet soda. That can't be healthy. And one day I just made a decision that, nope, I'm going to drink water. And I did. And I've never looked back. I'll have a diet soda. If I'm out at a restaurant, it's like, oh, I'll have a Diet Coke. And I used to be my thing. It was, I would swap off back then. This is how you know that diet soda is bad. I would swap off between Diet Coke and Fresca. And I love Fresca. But if you drink it for either one of them steady, like 2 liters a day for 4 or 5 months, you will cease to taste Diet Coke and Fresca, and you will begin to taste all of the chemicals that make Diet Coke, and make Fresca. That was probably what caused me to stop. But that was like the first thing I did. That was probably 15 years ago. But 10 years ago, I made a conscious choice to make a singular change. It was just, I want to just do one thing. And that's the one thing I'm going to do. And I'm going to make it permanent. I'm going to decide that if I fail, I'm going to get up and do it again. And that's probably the biggest hurdle to New Year's resolutions is people fail. You have that gigantic bowl of Friendly's ice cream at the Friendly's if you can even find one. I think there's like 8 restaurants left. And you go, oh, I'm a failure. I've blown it. Let me go get the industrial sized bucket of Nutella or the big bag of chips or whatever. I've given up. No, you can have a mistake, you can fail and then try again. And that's probably the biggest thing that when I look at things, that has been part of my success. So it was a series of dietary choices that I had made to just change things over time. And then 5 years ago, a little over 5 years ago, as I record this, it was like 5.25 when you're listening to this, I hired a personal trainer. And for years, I thought that was a waste of money, but I hate going to the gym. I hate it to this day. If I don't have my personal trainer there, I won't go. I don't know why, is he's not there today. It's a Friday morning, and I usually go Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and he can't be there today. I won't go, and I won't work out at home, and I have the stuff at home to work out. It's just a thing. Versus last week, I get a phone call. I'm getting ready to go over to the gym. I get a phone call. He says, "Look, my daughter's locked out of her house, and I have to go run over and pick her up. I'm going to be about 25 minutes late." And I said, "Yeah, we'll just cancel." He said, "I'm only going to be 25 minutes late. Go start." And I started. And even though he wasn't there, he was going to be there. And I worked as hard, if not harder, than I normally work for those first 25 minutes. And we finished up the workout together after that. So it was a big deal. And I have seen a massive transformation in not just the size of my body, certain parts getting smaller, certain parts getting bigger, but just in overall health. And that's a big deal to me. And that was kind of why I started this whole journey. It wasn't always about weight loss, although I knew I had to lose weight. It was more about, I want to be around when I'm 70, 80, 90, 100 years old. So I want to kind of talk about some things you can change today. And I want you to pick one. I just want you to pick one, and make that change and make it permanent this year. And then we're going to pick another one next year and go forward. Don't look at this as all or nothing. We want to make a change that can become permanent, because it's important, especially if you're Telecom right now, looking at what Verizon and AT&T have basically said over the last year, that they're not done cutting jobs, that they're going to get rid of people. And it's been easy so far. I'd say Verizon is, they just had the big, I think the biggest group of the latest VSP exited just before the first of the year. And most of those people have a lot of years of service, and we're looking forward to this, and it's a bonus plan. A lot of people are looking at it as, man, I'd really like to just get 5 more years, and you might not be able to. And AT&T is implementing has just implemented the get back to work. Is okay, it's time, 5 days a week, you're going to be back at work. And they expect a massive amount of attrition because of that. If people say, yeah, I don't feel like doing that, and they're not going to backfill those jobs, which means makes it that much harder to advance in the company and things of that nature. So with all of that going on, making sure that we have our financial stuff in order is a big deal. So it's January. Let's start talking about a couple things you can do. And you can pick more than one. What more importantly than how many you pick is making them permanent. I was listening to one more aside, and I'll start talking about the meat of this, but these are cool asides. Listening to this guy talk about making change permanent. And he was talking about how normal people, quote unquote, normal people, deal with making a change in their life. And he said it's a yo-yo syndrome. They're up and down. They're up and down. They get this burst of motivation. They do it, and they kind of run out of gas a little bit, and they get discouraged, and they get depressed, and they ignore it. And then hopefully, if they're lucky, they jump back into it. And if your diet's like this, I've been there. I have definitely been there. And he was talking about for business mostly, and just growing your business, which was what this talk was about. And he said, I interviewed all these highly successful business people, and they weren't results-based thinkers. They weren't focusing on that end goal. They were focusing on the change and making that change permanent. And that way, if you fail, you only failed a little bit. Oh, I didn't make that change today. It's kind of like the recovery route, the Alcoholics Anonymous of, one day at a time. It really is true. That's where that kind of, that same concept is definitely linked. Is making that change and deciding that regardless of how small it is, I'm going to make it permanent. It's not very glamorous. It's not exciting. It's much more fun to make all the changes at once and look like you're doing great, and you're going to fail. So with that, let's talk about some of the things. It's mid-January. If you're a paper person, I'm a little bit of a paper person. I like my bills in paper because it reminds me to pay them. I pay them all electronically, but I like the paper. I find it hard to ignore a bill in the mail. And if something comes through the email, I don't always see it. My credit card sends me an email telling me how much I owe. And then 3 days later, I get the bill. About 9 months out of 12, I pay the bill before the paper bill gets there. And about 3, I forget. So I like paper bills, but some people like paper statements. Right now is about the time you've received all of your investment, bank, 401k year-end statements. This is the time to look them over. Don't put them in the pile. Don't put them in the pile. If this is the only one thing you can do this year and make it permanent that every month this happens, do this one. Open the statements. Read them. Just read them. Just read them. Don't try to super understand everything. Maybe not even talk about the next thing we'll talk about, which is making changes to it, but understand it. If you're one of those people that has a stack of these and you dread opening them because you don't know and you're not sure, just open them. There's nobody there but you. You can look and go, I just still don't understand it, but at least they're open. Maybe they're 3-ring bounded. You can bind them and put them in a binder. And now you can look them up easier when you have to have something to look at. But making that permanent is a big deal. I have a client, Cheryl. Cheryl's a sweetheart. Her husband worked for Verizon for many, many years, passed away of cancer. Got to be 20 something years ago. And she comes to my office about once every 2 years with one of those clear storage, I want to say Tupperware. It's obviously not Tupperware. It's not even Rubbermaid. It's clear. You buy them at like Target that slide under the bed. She just throws all of her financial stuff into there. And she comes in with it when it gets filled up, which takes about 2 years. She brings it in and I go through and I hand her a handful of things back and that's it. She goes, that's it. So the rest of it's junk. If you opened it and understood it, you'd know that and it wouldn't cause you this anxiety. So number one, open the statements. Number two, let's look at the investments. This is a perfect time. It's January to look at the investments. How have they performed and reallocate based on your goals? Now that's a very broad statement. I can't give specifics of, oh, you should buy this or sell that. It dependent on what your goals are and what you're trying to do. You know, if you're following a classic asset allocation model, you want to look at investments that their piece of the pie, their piece of the allocation has gotten bigger and probably sell a little bit of those, and look at the things that have gotten smaller and probably buy a little bit of those. But you want to have an allocation. And whether you have that allocation yourself or you hire somebody like us to help you develop that, it's important that you reallocate on a regular basis. When I say regular, I look at it quarterly. I would probably make a move at least annually. And it really depends. I mean, when we reallocate for clients, when we look at client portfolios, we look at it very differently. We're constantly monitoring the investments and we're looking to some extent at a macro level at the client accounts. And then anywhere from 1 or 2 to 4 or 5 times a year, we'll be making changes to a client account, not including things like they need money and we're making liquidations and then we're adjusting allocations for that. So it really depends, but at least quarterly looking at it is important to do. At least annually making changes and making adjustments and checking in with that. The third thing you can do is look at where your investments are. Do you have investments that don't belong? And what I mean by that is, do you have an investment account? And I have several clients that have had this problem in the past. Do you have an investment account that's outside of the 401k at work? And do you get this gigantic 1099 every year that's causing you tax headaches? This is the time to look at that and see, is there a better way to do that? Can I move some of these investments in terms of type into my IRA and sell some other things inside the IRA or 401k rather, that I could buy inside of this taxable account that wouldn't cause me as much tax grief? That's still the overall portfolio. It goes back to allocations. You know, I'm building layers on this. That's a little bit more advanced person, but you definitely want to be looking at it because you could be leaving tax dollars on the table. We want to make sure that we maximize that. Every dollar we don't pay to Uncle Sam, we get to either save it or spend it on ourselves. HSA, it might be too late. Is open enrollment's closed, but I want you to start thinking about this one. Is if you have maximized your 401k, or even if you haven't, but you're still putting a significant amount of money into your 401k, HSA, great time to be looking at it. Look at the investments that are in it if you already have one. I hope you have one. But if you don't, this is the time when you say, okay, I need to make it permanent. This is something I'm going to change this year. HSA, if you're not quite familiar, it's kind of like a 401k for health costs. So things like prescriptions, doctor copays, the deductibles you have to pay sometimes, Band-Aids, pretty much almost anything outside of the greeting card and food and makeup area of your local CVS would be covered. It's a very broad. Eyeglasses, anything somewhat medical related can be paid for with HSA dollars. Now you put the HSA dollars on a pre-tax basis into the HSA. You take it out on a tax-free basis. You don't get that deal every day. It's a massive deal. Now here's my caveat is I want you to think about your HSA as something you use for retirement. Don't think about it as something you use during your working years. If you need to, like if you have your child is getting their wisdom teeth out or getting braces and it's going to cost a fortune, understandable. Take the money. No question. But if it's regular, just run-of-the-mill stuff, let that thing build up, because in retirement, all of a sudden, all of these health insurance expenses that you don't think about today because they're covered with the employer plan, and the employer plan is taken right out of your paycheck and you don't even think about it, you're writing a lot of those checks. And having something to fall back on that's specifically set aside for that is a big deal. But in terms of if you have an existing HSA, this is the time to look at it and say, how are the investments doing? And I want you to think about making sure that your investments match your time horizon. If you're in your 40s and you're retiring in your 60s, do you want everything in a money market? A reasonable person would say probably not. A reasonable person would probably say, let's be more aggressive than a money market account. You want to start thinking this way. Is when are you going to be spending this money? It's going to be probably after 65, might be after age 70. So you're going to plan those investments accordingly to make sure you maximize those dollars for the future. This is a big one. And this is one of those things you should be doing on an annual basis. Very similar is increase your 401k contribution. It's a great time of year. Great time of year to take care of this is 1%, 2%. I wouldn't go much more than maybe 3 in any given time period. But if you are not maximizing your 401k, which is somewhere around $23,000 for people under the age of 50, and somewhere around $30,000 rather for those over 50, depending on what tax year this is, that's a lot of money you can put away. And if you're not putting away the maximum, you should be trying to get there as best you can. And 1 or 2 or even 3% won't make that big of a difference to you on a week by week, month by month basis. But it is going to make a big difference in your retirement because it's going to build up over time. So it's important to do that is every January. It's a great thing to do. It's a great habit to get into of, oh, let's bump that by an extra 1 or 2 or 3%. To save even more money, to put even more money away. Obviously, the most successful clients I have did this. They maximized their 401k for the maximum number of years, and they didn't have to worry in retirement. They could kind of back things off and chill out and enjoy the fruits of their labors. And they weren't really worried about how they were going to come up with money in retirement. It was Social Security plus their investments. So be aware of that. This one's a strange one, but I want you to do it. And I want you to get in the habit of doing this one if you can. Again, pick one. This may not be the one for you this year, but I want it in the back of your head of someday this is going to be something you do. And I do this religiously, not because I do what I do. I do what I do because I do things like this. I'll say it that way. I don't watch my money because I'm a financial advisor. I'm a financial advisor because I like watching my money. That's what it comes down to. I always enjoyed this type of stuff. So I get it that not everybody is wired like me. Not everybody loves numbers like me. I love numbers. I'm a maniac for numbers. You're probably not, but I want you to start getting into this habit, and it's for good reason, is I do what's called a pro forma tax, income tax statement every January. I want to know before April 15th, do I owe or am I getting money back? Now, my situation is probably a little more complicated than yours because I own my own business, and, Successful Money Strategies is my business. And that means that my income can be variable, my personal income, although things are fairly steady within the business. It depends on how the market is performing. It depends on capital expenditures we made this year. Things of that nature will determine what my income will look like and may determine how much money I am putting away in taxes. So I run a pro forma. It's a good idea for you to run pro formas, especially in years where you have an unusual situation, sale of a piece of property, liquidation of a large investment, things of that nature. You want to know in January if you're going to have a tax problem in April, or if you're going to have a tax windfall. That's always nice. I am amazed at the number of people that just watch and they wait for their CPA or they wait for TurboTax to give them that number. And they go, wow, I'm getting a refund. I won. Or, oh, I owe money. I lost. Those aren't wins or losses. And we've talked about that before on this podcast. But knowing early allows you to kind of prepare for that. And the last one, I want you to review every single year. If you can, pick one thing. Review your emergency fund. Now, I'm going to bet 85% of you right now listening, watching this, are either thinking one of two things: emergency fund, or, oh, I should have an emergency fund, shouldn't I? Most people don't. Most people don't have a fallback position. You want to review your fallback position. It's kind of like if you've ever been on a cruise. I went on a cruise once 20 something years ago. And I was like so frustrated by this. So you get on the cruise ship and off we go, and we take off from the dock, and I'm thinking we're going to hang out. Now we had two little kids at the time. So we're hanging out in the room. We're checking this out and that out. Going to go for a walk. Oh no. Before we leave, you're going to go to the lifeboat drill. I don't want to go to the lifeboat drill. I'm good. I'll find one. Don't worry. No. And everybody has to go. And it's like, come on. Why do we have to go to the lifeboat drill? This is so stupid. And I was watching back right around Thanksgiving. There was a special on, I think it was probably on PBS on, I can't think of the name of the ship the cruise ship that crashed in Italy. Gosh, it's going to be almost 10 years ago and flipped over, and the number of people that died. And a lot of it was related to people not knowing those things. And it's like, oh, that's why you go on that. That's why you sit there and listen to the stewardess drone on about, should there be a sudden drop in cabin pressure, and make sure you put your seatbelt on, just like every other seatbelt in the world. You go click, and that's how it works. And they've got to show you, go click just in case you're the one person that doesn't know how to click a seatbelt. Having an emergency fund is important because that's what it's there for. It's not a planned fund. Your emergency fund is not your Christmas club. That's not an emergency fund. That's a Christmas club. It's not a fund you tap into. It is money that you know that no matter what, you won't be touching because there might be an emergency. Now, what's a financial emergency? We got to go to Vegas for the weekend is not an emergency. It's not. I need to go see grandma because she's in the hospital in Billings, Montana. That's an emergency. My water heater just went. That's an emergency. I need a new roof. Might be an emergency. It's something you should be planning for already. But you want to have money available that it may not be just sitting around doing nothing, but in an emergency, I can go after that. And you want to be reviewing that every year to see how much is in there, looking at the potential needs you might have over the next years, not necessarily emergencies, but things we consider emergencies because, something wore out. You want to be aware of that on a year by year basis. So that's I think there's 7 of these. I didn't even count it. That's kind of like the 7 things I came up with that I know I do every January, and you probably should too. But again, it's hard to do all 7 all at once. I didn't start my life. I didn't graduate college and move out and get married and sit down the following year and go, I'm going to do these 7 things. It was over time. I added them as I knew I needed them, and I knew that I could make those changes permanent. I want you to think about this the same. I want you to think about your weight goals and your success goals and all of your other goals that you had 2 or 3 weeks ago that you're hitting the end of your rope, back it off. Pick one thing in that area. Not all of it, one thing. Man, I'd really like to lose 60 pounds. Great. Don't do that. Don't lose 60 pounds. Make a change. Look at your diet and say, oh, I'm drinking, a chocolate shake every day for lunch. Probably got to get rid of the chocolate shake. And that's it. Same thing here. We've got 7 things. If the most basic one is check your statements, then you check your statements. It goes back to, and I'll just tell you one more minor story, and then I'm done. Then we're done for the day, and you can go back to your ice cold January morning. Dick Gregory, can't believe I remember that name. Remember Dick Gregory? I remember Dick Gregory from Sanford and Son. So Dick Gregory is one of the bit players in Sanford and Son, and he also helps morbidly obese people become less morbidly obese back in the 80s, probably beyond that. And I remember watching a program on him back in the 80s, and I'm like, no, that's just stupid. That's not going to work. And he'd literally get them to the point where, okay, he'd take time to adjust their diet slightly. And then it was, okay, we're going to go outside. That's how morbidly obese these people were, was they were stuck in their beds. We're going to go outside. And I'm thinking, this is a colossal waste of time. That little change is not going to help. Okay, we're going to walk down to the end of your walkway to the sidewalk and walk back. That's like the next day or the next week. And he took it really slow with these people because they had such a huge change to make. And there was no way they were going to get on a bicycle, a stationary bicycle, and do a whole bunch of work. So it just wasn't worth it. It was important to do small changes. And I want you to start thinking about those small changes as well, to make some change, whether it's to open the statements, reallocate, really look at your taxes, do the pro forma, whatever it is, pick one thing today. I think you'll do great with that. That's all I have for you today. Again, have a great cold January. Hopefully you're someplace warm. I'm in the cold January, so I'm kind of stuck here, but that's what I signed up for. And, if you have questions, jump down to the show notes. Definitely can help you out there. If you have ideas for the podcast, jump down to the show notes. Reach out to us. We're always looking for new ideas. If you have questions specific to your situation, jump down to the show notes. Go figure and reach out. We love to help people that listen. We love to help out listeners and help out people, especially within the telecom community. So stay safe out there.
Thank you for listening to Your Telecom Retirement with your host, Dennis O'Keefe. Please click the follow button to be notified when new episodes become available. You can find information for Dennis, our guest, or resources mentioned in today's episode in the show notes. The information in this podcast is for educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Every individual situation is different. You should consult an expert before making any changes to your financial situation. For more information, please see our disclosure information at www.successfulmoney.com.